Next on the docket, the Russia probe. Bob Mueller, he's reportedly ramping it up, focusing on the collusion aspect with an eye towards trying to wrap things up by this fall. Bloomberg breaking the news, describing where Mueller is building his case. Quote, suspicious contacts between at least 13 people associated with Trump's presidential campaign and Russians, they have fueled the debate over collusion. Some of those encounters have been known for months. The Russian ambassador, whose conversations forced Attorney General Jeff Sessions to recuse himself. The Russians who wrangled a meeting with Donald Trump Jr. at Trump Tower in July of 2016 after dangling the promise of political dirt on Democrat Hillary Clinton. Other encounters continue to emerge, including a Russian's chat with veteran Trump advisor Roger Stone at a cafe in Florida. Then there's Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign manager, sent to jail, that after prosecutors filed new charges of attempted witness tampering. And a judge in Northern Virginia just refused to dismiss the charges against Manafort. It is the same judge who was critical of the Mueller probe in the past. And joining us now to discuss, former federal prosecutor Eli Honig. And Eli, as always, I appreciate the time. It says something about just how bizarre a chapter we are in American history that this isn't our lead tonight where we are. In fact, with everything else going on, it's below the fold, if you will. But talk about what the Mueller probe, at least reports per Bloomberg, from a timing aspect, that he's ramping up, hoping to get it done this fall. Obviously, won't presume that would be before the November midterms. Read between the lines from both collusion and obstruction, where you think the state of this investigation is.
Yeah, Richard, thanks for having me. And I agree with you. Even though this story hasn't been front of the news for the last couple of weeks, I wouldn't confuse that with inaction on Mueller's part. Rest assured, he and his team are plugging away every day. You can see things, though, if you do look, sort of starting to come together. The way Mueller has built this case is just building block by building block, right? Indictment by indictment. And as you said before, we've already seen this repeated pattern of people in the Trump orbit meeting with Russians, trying to get dirt on Hillary Clinton for the election, and then commonly lying about it afterwards. So you can see what's being called the collusion piece of the case, not technically a legal term or a criminal term, but the conspiracy piece of this case coming together. At the same time, sort of hand in hand with that, is the obstruction case. All the false denials, the false testimony, 2 grand juries, 2 FBI agents, to the House and Senate committees. So I do think it's likely that there will be some major moment here before the early fall. There's a long-standing policy at DOJ, just a policy, that you try to not make major moves that may impact elections too close to elections. That is a long-standing policy. That said, it doesn't necessarily outweigh the need to do a full and complete investigation. So I think if Mueller can wrap things up, or at least some sort of discrete part of this, by the early fall, he will do so. But I also don't think he will automatically drop whatever's going on regardless just because the calendar turns.
And for me, I see things in the news element of this. Forget about what Mueller's doing in the probe, that I say, wait a minute. To a layperson, Ellie, it seems like it's obstruction. I'll give you 2 examples. You have Rudy Giuliani, the attorney for Trump, all but flanding basically pardons here as Manafort is getting ready to go inside here because he's already done witness tampering. It sure seems to me that would be obstruction, that you say, hey, don't cooperate with the feds because we'll take care of you on the other side. And on the flip side, this afternoon, the president's talking about setting up a meeting with Vladimir Putin, a central figure, or at least, his hands. That was the whole part of this. Now, I know those are news items, but you could almost argue potentially or definitively those are obstructionary acts in the middle of a probe.
Yeah, so Richard, you just gave what would be a really powerful prosecution closing argument. I think what you just said is sort of the common sense understanding. I think people who apply common sense can understand, why is Trump and Giuliani, why are they always talking about pardon? Are they, clearly they're trying to send a message to Manafort, to Cohen. But, there's always going to be a flip side where the defense is going to say, no, that's not our intent. We're just, talking to the public about what is a constitutional right. So that one's going to get down into intent. And you have to look at the whole picture here. You have to look at the repeated pattern, the false statements that we now know the president helped craft after the meeting between his son and Kushner and Manafort, the infamous hotel meeting. Look at that. the president was part of crafting that misleading statement, according to his own lawyers. You have all these different people, from Papadopoulos to Flynn, lying to the FBI about their contacts with Russians. And I think this is just one more piece of it.
Another figure, Michael Cohen, we're hearing contradictory reports, but more so seeming that he seems more and more willing to cooperate. His choice of attorney, to some, seems to beg the issue that they're potentially working out a deal, maybe already have here, with Mueller and friends. Take us back to your old life here. What goes into figuring out for one's client what is the best deal, what assurances they could or couldn't get from the feds, and also with the specter of the pardons that I just mentioned with Giuliani, how does that calculation work?
Yeah, good question. So I dealt with a lot of cooperators when I was a federal prosecutor, primarily mafia cooperators, guys who had been in the mob and flipped. So a fairly dramatic situation. But that said, there are still a lot of similarities here. Ultimately, someone in Michael Cohen's position who he seems fairly likely to be charged with something in the fairly near future, has to decide, where does my loyalty lie? Does it lie with Donald Trump, or does it lie with myself and my family? And you mentioned his attorney. Michael Cohen has recently retained Guy Petrillo, who was a boss of mine at the Southern District of New York. He was chief of the entire criminal division, and he is universally known as a straight shooter, as someone who understands the way the system works and understands the value of cooperation, and will do whatever is in his client's best interest and not somebody else's best interest. And so, Guy can sit with Michael Cohen and explain, here's how it works when you cooperate. You have to go in and tell them everything, but it's your best hope to get the lowest possible sentence. Guy knows that. Anyone who's come through the Southern District knows that. So I would surmise that's the type of counsel that Michael Cohen's receiving now.
Finally, Senator Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia, he sits in the Intelligence Committee, and maybe it was a lack of judgment on his part, maybe a little liquid courage, who knows. But he said to people at this event, if you think you've seen wild stuff relating to the Mueller probe, just wait, buckle up in effect here. It's going to be a wild couple months. Now, he obviously is privy, as he even went on to say, like Mueller is, to seeing some of the stuff. Do you believe, and kudos to Mueller and team for being so radio silent through this whole thing with all the noise coming from at least one side, do you believe we, the people, are going to be shocked just how voluminous and how damning some of the evidence might be that's going to come out?
I do. I haven't had anything to drink, but I agree with Senator Warner. I do think we are going to have an incredibly eventful few months ahead. And, we're going to see what happens with Manafort. Does he flip? Does he not flip? Does he go through with his trials? We may see the Manafort trials. He's got 2 coming. We're going to see what happens with Michael Cohen. Is he going to flip? Obviously, if he flips, that's a huge game changer. I think we're going to see more indictments. People like Roger Stone, Michael Caputo are in jeopardy. I don't think Donald Trump Jr. or Jared Kushner are out of the woods for their meetings with the Russians and their false statements. Ultimately, the big question is, what is Mueller going to do with respect to the president? I think at a minimum, we will see a detailed, fact-based, damning report of the president that gets sent over to the House of Representatives, who will then consider impeachment at a minimum.
Oh, my gosh. Hey, Ellie, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? Thank you, my friend, as always. I appreciate the time. You too.
All right. Anytime.
All right, folks, we're not done yet here. A busy legal day, to say the least. When we come back, corruption season. 2 major trials happening so close to each other. Our Dominic Carler pulling double duty, covering both simultaneously. The Skelos case, former state Senate Majority Leader retrial, and the Buffalo Billions bid rigging trial case here. 2 trials, 1 block, 1 man. Dom, straight ahead.